Welcome to the podcast. I'm Duncan CJ. You're listening to Happiness, episode 145. Our mission is for every man, woman, and child to be empowered with the knowledge of how to be happy. The goal of this show is to introduce you to the people and the ideas that will help you live truly fulfilling lives. Today, I have the pleasure of having Dr. Michael Shermer back onto the show for round two. Dr. Shermer is the founding publisher of Skeptic magazine, the host of the Science Salon podcast, a presidential fellow at Chapman University where he teaches Skepticism 101. For 18 years, he was a monthly columnist for Scientific American. He's the author of the New York Times bestsellers, Why People Believe Weird Things and The Believing Brain. Also, Why Darwin Matters, The Science of Good and Evil, The Moral Arc, and Heavens on Earth. His new book is Giving the Devil His Due. He's appeared on Oprah, The Colbert Report, Larry King Live, and his 2 TED Talks have been viewed by millions. Neil deGrasse Tyson described Michael as a beacon of reason in an ocean of irrationality. Michael, thank you so much for coming back on for round two. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. It's nice to be back on.
Whenever there's a high level of anxiety and uncertainty in an environment, be it your own personal life or society at large, belief in conspiracy theories goes up. Why is that?
Well, because conspiracy theories are a way of kind of wrapping your mind around a complex and chaotic world and simplifying it. And there's also a tendency to think that, someone who's in power has more power than they actually have, than you think you have, and therefore they're pulling the strings to make things happen, that sort of thing. So groups that are out of power tend to be more conspiratorial about groups in power. So typically in an election, the losing party will concoct more conspiracies, theories about the rigged election and so on than the winning party. The Trump administration was a little odd in that way. Trump kept promoting conspiracy theories even after he won. And it was like, dude, you won. You're supposed to drop the conspiracies. Hillary's supposed to be the one doing conspiracy theories now. So that was kind of weird. And of course, COVID-19 has both. It has a lot of uncertainties. There's still a lot we don't know. And, science has been grappling to try to figure out what the hell is going on with this virus, where it came from, where it's going. Is there more than one? How are we going to have a vaccine? And on and on and on. That kind of uncertainty fuels conspiracy theories, of course, about powerful people like pharmaceutical companies, government agencies, large corporations, rich people like Bill Gates. These are almost always the target of conspiracy theories when there's some medical scare. For example, autism and vaccines is a classic case, but pretty much all of the previous potential pandemics, which never panned out in my lifetime, like this one has. This is a once in a century kind of pandemic, and of course that fuels conspiracy theories. So our next issue of Skeptic, we have a big cover story on QAnon, which is one of the crazier ones I've heard in a long time. But really, in fact, it's kind of a recycled old conspiracy theory about pedophiles and sex ring operations and satanic cults. These ideas go way, way back. And the QAnon is really just recycling all of that and then grafting onto it things like, Trump is fighting against the deep state. And in the deep state is this satanic cult of pedophiles led by Hillary or whatever. The names change, but the details are specific for a particular conspiracy theory, but the deeper themes come up over and over and over. Repressed memory conspiracy theory and the satanic cult conspiracy theory and pedophile ring conspiracy theories. And they have just enough element of truth to them. For example, pedophilia is a real thing, as we saw with the Catholic Church. And so, we can't just automatically discount anybody's ideas about that. But the question is always, is it what it's being said to be? Is it really a vast right-wing conspiracy or left-wing conspiracy or whatever? So our approach at Skeptic is that you have to just take each claim one at a time. What is the evidence for that particular claim, rather than some sweeping theory about everything in the world?
And real conspiracy theories that turn out to be accurate are usually very narrowly focused. For example, insider trading or corporate manipulation. Things like I think you talked about the Volkswagen emission scandal, or some government in a specific country attempting to manipulate an election. Those things, if it's very narrowly focused, the probability
that's right
increases.
Yeah. So what we want to know is the conspiracy theory true or not? Because some of them are, some of them are not. Watergate was a conspiracy. The assassination of Lincoln was a conspiracy. Iran-Contra, that was a conspiracy. And so on. There's lots of them. The question is does that mean all of them are? No. So how do we distinguish? What's the kind of algorithm we can run to distinguish between true and false conspiracy theories? So you mentioned a few. How big is a conspiracy theory? If it's, again, cheating the emission standards scandal by Volkswagen, that's a very specific conspiracy theory. That one turned out to be true. Insider trading, government politicians, that are lining their personal pockets, or, upgrading their homes through the, government largesse. Those are very targeted, specific things that don't surprise any of us, because that's what people do. If they can get away with it, they'll cheat. But, when you scale it up to, world domination, Bill Gates is going to control the world. Okay, come on. That's not likely to be true, because nobody can control the world, And when I was researching my course on conspiracies and conspiracy theories that I did for Amazon Audible teaching company, that and one of the best quotes I found was that even scarier that there's some cabal of, lizard aliens running the world, is that no one is running the world. No one's in charge. No one's pulling the strings. Shit happens. That's just the way it is. It's mostly just randomness. And that, in a way, is scarier. It's like, whoa, you mean what? And I think that, in part, is a good explanation for conspiracy theories. People would rather have, that there's 12 guys in London called the Illuminati, and they're calling all the shots. That seems a little more comforting. I can get my mind around that, rather than that economies, are these huge, complex systems that no one really understands. Whoa, okay, that's even scarier.
Can you describe entropy to anyone who's not familiar with the phrase? I know some people are, but what do we mean when we're talking about entropy?
Yeah, shit happens. That's the bumper sticker version of entropy. Well, entropy is just, that in any particular system, energy runs down. So that's why there never has been and never will be a perpetual motion machine, because entropy takes its effect. It's the second law of thermodynamics. That is, systems move from more ordered to less ordered. And so this translates into things like warm things get cold. The gradient moves toward the ambient temperature in the room, for example. So you need to heat up your burger or your coffee, to get it above room temperature. Or if it's cold, then it'll warm up to room temperature. So, and that has to do with how molecules are moving around in a system, a gas or a liquid. In terms of, think of something like a sandcastle on a beach, so you put all this effort into making a sandcastle. There are far more ways for the sand grains to be ordered in a kind of a blob, as opposed to the number of ways the sand grains can be ordered into a nice castle. And so as the day goes on, and wind and surf and little children running around stomping on your sandcastle, that's entropy. There's just so many more ways for the grains to dissolve into a gruel of nothingness rather than an ordered structure. So how this applies to human systems, for example, there's far more ways to fail than there are to succeed in life. So you have to try lots of things. You have to accumulate a lot of failures and expect it and be okay with it, because that's normal. That's to be expected. And if you just think about like how many people can get that job, president of the United States, CEO of Google, whatever, almost nobody. So when people think, well, I got overlooked for the job because of racism or sexism or some bias against me, or they don't like me or whatever, it's far more likely that, the 1,000 people wanted that job and you were one of the 1,000. It was 1 out of 1,000. There's probably no other reason other than entropy. It's just almost nobody can do that. Right. And that's true for everything we do, all the way up to, that if you don't make your bed and clean your room, it's not going to order itself. You have to do it. Right. Your body is constantly running down. Entropy is just taking its toll. There's far more ways for you to have your bodily system fall apart than it is for it to be healthy. So you have to push back against entropy by, say, working out every day, eating healthy foods, whatever. And so most of the stuff we get from the self-help movement, self-help and actualization movement, it has to do with just pushing back against entropy, just doing stuff every day. Make your bed every day, clean your room every day, work out every day, shower and, clean your clothes. It's just stuff that, and all of it, don't forget to weed your garden and clean the dust out of your room. All of that is just pushing back against entropy because that's the natural state of things. Things will just run down if you do nothing. So the purpose of life is to do something, to push back, carve out a little niche of order in the sea of chaos that is entropy.
That perfectly answered my next question. I was going to say, you talk about the first law of life is to fight back against this entropy. So to accept it, step one is to realize what entropy is, that you're not going to suddenly leave your car out for 5 months and you're going to come back and it's going to be cleaner and working better than when you left it. So just to recognize that and then to be fighting back against it.
Yeah, I find this also, it also helps me, I think, adjust to failures that I have, not just me, but anybody. Once I kind of understood this concept, I'm always trying new things. I'm going to try this. I'm going to try that. I'm going to do a TV show. I'm going to write a novel. I'm going to do this or that. I'm always kind of pushing myself to try new things. So when I fail, which is most of the time, I don't think, oh, somebody had it in for me, or the stars were not aligned, or God's angry, or it's a racist society, or people don't like white males anymore. I don't go to any of those places. I just think, well, most things I try, I'm going to fail. That's just the normal thing. So I don't take it personally and think, oh God, another failure. It's like, well, another failure. Okay, good. I think if you keep that in mind, it doesn't feel so bad to fail.
In 1859, John Stuart Mill, he wrote that he who knows only his own position doesn't even know that. Can you expand on that?
Yes. Well, so here I use that quote in Giving the Devil His Due to talk about why we should be open to what other people have to say, that is their opinions. And the reason is because none of us are omniscient. We're not deities. We don't know everything. Nobody's smart enough to create a whole society from scratch or invent a whole new lifestyle from scratch. You got to, or a theory or anything. So you got to talk to other people. You got to engage with other people and try your ideas out. Again, back to entropy, most ideas that I come up with are probably going to be wrong. That's true for everybody, including scientists, right? So scientists are often just spitballing ideas just to see what sticks, what works. What's left standing is, not true with a capital T, but it has a likelihood of being true with a small t in science. And again, the only way to figure that out, because most people are, none of us are omniscient, is to engage with other people, talk to other people, find out what they think about your ideas and or what their ideas are, especially people that don't agree with you. Because it's easy to find people that agree with you, because that's what feels good. I want to talk to people and hang out with people that agree with me. And this is true for all of us. Conservatives watch Fox News and liberals watch CNN or whatever, and conservatives read the Wall Street Journal, or while liberals Los Angeles Times, right? So I read them both and add them up, divide by 2 to get the truth. No, just kidding. Again, just to kind of get different perspectives on a particular subject broadens the horizon to what's possible.
Have you heard the Charlie Munger quote? Where he said, what is it? He was like, I never allow myself to hold an opinion on anything that I don't know the other side's argument better than they do.
Yeah, I like that. That's great. I might use that. That's good. Although that I'm not sure that's actually true for anybody, but it's a good ideal to strive for. Before I commit to a belief, I'm going to talk to somebody who doesn't believe it. Yeah, it's a good strategy I've used with my students on, say, the abortion issue. Most of them are pro-choice. And, okay, what are the best arguments on the pro-life position? Most of them have no idea. So it's like, well, go research that and see how strong your pro-choice position is. And if you come back and you're just as strong as you were, well, then all the better. Then your position is even stronger by knowing what the other side says. Maybe it's not. Maybe you change your mind. And that too would be enlightening.
I was watching in an interview you did on the Rubin Report. I appreciated the amount of times you said the phrase, I think that, I think this, or I think that. Your lack of certainty makes me trust you more, not less.
Well, thank you. Yes. And most of the time I mean that. I mean, I'm not sure about a lot of things, and I try to think it through. But as a strategy in terms of engaging with other people, I think it's good because it shows the other person you're listening, that you respect what they have to say and you want to think about it and process it before you just blurt out, your opinion. I mean, often conversations are just two monologues, just two people talking past each other, and you're just waiting for the other person to shut up so you can make your comment, and you're not really listening. And people know that. You can sense whether somebody's listening or not. Are they looking at you in the eyes? Are they nodding? Are they trying to process it, what you're saying? Are they thinking about it? So, this idea of steel manning the other person's position instead of straw manning it is to repeat in your own words what you think they're saying. So when I do this, I often find that either I didn't get it quite right, and so they correct me, which is good. Or I think often what happens is they hear what their argument sounds like, and they think, that doesn't sound that great. I think I'll modify it in real time here. And then we end up sort of going back and forth about what exactly it is that's on the table to be debated or argued. And that kind of refinement back and forth is really constructive in terms of getting at what the core differences are between us. And, so I think that's a useful strategy, particularly in political matters where, things are so divided between left and right. And it's always been that way, but we know from data showing that, that the center is getting smaller and the two left and right sides are pulling further apart and getting larger in terms of raw numbers and percentages. And so it's more important than ever to find out what the people on that other side over there are saying. If we can kind of reach any kind of compromise to, just sort of keep things going in civilization without the whole thing breaking down. Of course, a lot of people are worried about the upcoming election. We're doing this 2 weeks before the November 3rd presidential election here in the United States. And, a lot of people are worried, including me a little bit. I'm not a doomsayer, but, things shit happens, so to speak. And you never know. So I think it's good to kind of calm things down. Social media is not helpful. Neither is talk radio. All these TV shows, in part, are they have a sort of an advertising model where they have to ramp up the heat of the subject under debate here to make it seem polarizing and crazy and way out there to keep eyeballs on there so they can sell more ads and stay in business. I mean, it's, I don't know to what extent people like Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson on Fox News really believe what they're saying, or I could maybe go to the other side on MSNBC and some of their hosts, and do they really believe it? Are they kind of pushing the narrative a certain direction further because it gets more eyeballs because it's more controversial? This started actually back in the late 80s, early 90s with the rise of conservative talk radio. People like Rush Limbaugh discovered that the more antagonizing they were to the left, the more people listen to their show. And so you ramp it up and demonize the other side, and people like to listen to that. It was like on a lighter scale, the reasons people gave for listening to Howard Stern, because I want to hear what he has to say, because I want to see what crazy thing he says next. It's almost just kind of entertaining. How crazy can this guy get? How far out there can they get? And now you listen to conservative talk radio or television, and the word "the left" that must come up 1,000 times an hour. This is all you hear: the left, the left, the left, the left, the left. The liberals, the left, the progressive, the regressive left, they just go on and on. Whereas 90% of liberals are pretty centrist. They're not at all like what they're being described as, and that to me is problematic.
The evolutionary psychology of literature. I never thought I'd come hear those two words together, but the study was conducted that compiled the greatest works of literature and did a content analysis to see what themes come up over and over again. What did that show?
Well, I like that area because it's looking for the commonality in human nature. That is, certain themes come up in all cultures in their literature because they have to do with things that matter to us. So it's kind of tapping into human nature. So things like sex and love, power, hierarchy, truth-telling and lying, honesty, trustworthiness. Those are things that matter for human relations. We're a social primate species. It's important that we have a reputation that's positive amongst our fellow primates, and because you need them. None of us can survive on our own. And you want to be loved and respected. And so how do you do that? And so a lot of novels, the themes revolve around those. They come up over and over and over. Same thing in Hollywood. I mean, long before evolutionary psychology, it was always kind of a joke in Hollywood that there's like 7 different kinds of movies. That's it. They're all variations on 7 different themes. Now, maybe it's 10 or 12 or 6 or whatever. But the idea is that movies are not random in terms of what they're about. They're about certain things that come up over and over. Rom-com, right? So it's a romantic comedy. And it's certain things that are common in every single one of those kinds of movies, or drama or adventure or whatever. You put a hero in peril, and then you get him out of peril. The hero's journey, the Joseph Campbell stuff about what the appeal of Star Wars was when Bill Moyers had that series in the late 80s. With Joseph Campbell talking about Star Wars and what it really meant. That was an eye-opener to a lot of people. Like, wow, I had no idea that's why I like Star Wars. You got a good guy and a bad guy, a black and white, and a hero's journey. He has to leave home, and he goes on an adventure, and his life is threatened, but he survives, and he comes back with the message of what it all means, and it helps his family and his community and so on. That's a very common theme, like Christ going out into the desert and coming back, and being crucified and then resurrected, the born again thing, starting over, destruction, redemption. These are themes that come up over and over for a good reason. They tell us something about ourselves.
In your book, you make a distinction between binary thinking and continuous thinking. What's the difference between those two?
Well, our tendency is to think in a binary way. There's good and bad people. It's black and white. It's good and evil. There's 2 types of people that categorize things into 2 types, and people that don't, as I humorously say. But that's not very productive for understanding a complex, continuous world. It's like poverty. What is poverty? Well, the UN defines it as making $1.90 a day or less, or it might be $2.20 a day or less. Whatever the criteria is, you draw the line there. You have to draw the line somewhere. And say below that line, we're going to call it extreme poverty. Below this next line, we'll call it poverty. And above that, what are you going to call that? Not poverty. So the poverty or not poverty thing, that's a binary way of thinking. But making $2.30 a day is not exactly being, prosperous or wealthy. You're still poor, but just not as poor. So the words we use to put things into categories is not always as useful as a continuous thing. This is the abortion issue. Pro-lifers think that life begins at conception, therefore anything after the day of conception is, murder, that if you take the life of the fetus. Whereas science doesn't tell us that. It's one place you could draw the line, but you could draw the line at half a dozen other places. And the consensus now, at least in the pro-choice community, is among scientists, is that maybe 20 weeks to 22, 23 weeks or so. Well, what's the criteria there? Well, there's several. When the kind of neural networks are put together in the brain, where there's some kind of sense of suffering or well-being in the fetus, and therefore that would be more human-like. But even there's going to be variation among fetuses, and it's somewhat arbitrary where you draw the line, because it's a continuum. But at least that approach to thinking makes you more, I think, flexible in your thinking about these kinds of important issues.
What is one thing our listeners can start doing today that will have a positive impact on their lives? If you had to give us all one piece of homework, what would it be? It's,
I think, having a sense of humility. That just I call this the Copernican Principle apply personally. Copernican Principle is that we're not special. We're not the center of the universe and so on. The Copernican Principle apply personally is I'm not special. There's nothing about me just because I'm me and you're not that makes me special. And I'm not omniscient. What do I know? And that kind of humility makes you more tolerant of people that think differently from you. Like, maybe I could learn something from this person. I mean, I try to think about that when I get sort of trapped with somebody on a plane and they want to talk my ear off or whatever. I just think, okay, I really don't want to be here. I really just want to read my book. But okay, what can I learn from this person? Because I know for sure this guy knows something I don't know. So I'm going to just ask a lot of questions. I had I ride my bike every day, a couple hours, and there's this guy that always shows up. He just shows up. He likes to yak at the coffee after the ride. It's like, okay, this guy's really getting irritating. But it turns out he was a lobbyist in Washington for decades. And I thought, I know absolutely nothing about lobbying and how it works. So I'm going to turn this irritating yakety yak guy that I don't want to listen to into something interesting. What can I learn from this guy? And it turns out it was super interesting just by kind of asking the right questions to get something out of somebody you didn't know before. And I think that kind of humility is a useful strategy.
Last but not least, how can people find out more about you and your work? Where can we send them?
Skeptic.com, michaelshermer.com, Amazon for my books, but skeptic.com for the magazine, and my podcast is online at skeptic.com or Science Salon. I have my own podcast, Science Salon podcast. So that's it.
Awesome. And if you go to happiness.info, I'm going to link up all of the links underneath this interview. Michael, thank you so much for chatting with me today. I really enjoyed it.
Happiness.info